3 minutes, quick for
okay, quick, very quick. I'm a retired person. That's it.
No, a little bit more.
Oh, a little bit more. Okay. So, in fact, I'm working again now for FSSC, which is a non-for-profit foundation that is trying to develop the social side of the enterprise. So, conditions on work, conditions on employment, equality, human rights, and all this. Part of it, this is what I work as strategic advisor for them. My past history, in fact, I was retired from Nestle. I was 30 years in Nestle, and I was the responsible for compliance worldwide for the group, which makes a kind of, how to say, enriching experience where you can see many, many things. And that was a very, very interesting job. And before that, well, I've been 30 years there. But before that, I worked at the United Nations. I work on the Swiss industry. In fact, I'm Swiss Spanish citizen, dual citizen. So my interest now is this. So I'm out of my past technical works and is more now the social side. That is what I would like to discuss about you. So the social side on the supply chain.
Yeah, good evening, and of course, thanks for surviving over the whole day here. It was a lot of interesting topics for today, at least for me. Of course, a complete different view coming from the logistics world. And of course, we have heard a lot of things about supply chain, also from productive industry. Yeah, my name is Markus Prinz. I'm on behalf of TAPA EMEA here today. I have background in logistics 20 years ago. So I've taken care about deliveries of high value products, mobile phones, more in detail, alcohol, tobacco, so everything what you can always buy somewhere, but not for the original price, I've taken care about. And then I made my my hobby to my day job. Then I moved from the logistics world to the Transport and Asset Protection Association. I'm responsible there for standard certification and training. And I will give you some more background about these standards later in at least our 20
This
minutes.
will be the next question then. Okay. Michael, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Mickaël Daudin. I'm here representing the International Tin Supply Chain Initiative, which is a not-for-profit traceability and due diligence program. My background, I'm political scientist, and I've been doing this work on traceability and due diligence for the past 10 years. Mostly involved in the upstream supply chain. I've heard upstream today, but I have a different definition of upstream. So we look at all the supply chain from the mine to the smelter. Working a lot on due diligence, engaging in the past with international stakeholder groups such as the Global Battery Alliance or the Voluntary Principles on Security and Human Rights, for those of you who know that. I'll talk a bit more about what we do in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mika. Probably on your organizations, the next one, you have started on that one already, but probably to what is the relation of your organizations to the responsible sourcing? And probably Markus, I have a certain order in my head to make that transparent. Markus from the Transport Asset Association, I would say this is the tangible goods. This is, in that sense, it's not that it's simplistic, but this is still probably the most first thing you can grasp. Then I have Francisco, who is very much into the governance, in this certification. You are having almost like this concept of a company who is looking at their processes, how do we do the processes. This is almost like if we do trade together, we are also changed by each other. Wandel durch Handel, whether that is still the right thing to do today. But and then I would say there is Michael, who is probably a little bit even further upstream in the supply chain. So this is a little bit why I typically start with Markus. And Markus, please, what is TAPA? How is TAPA used today? Which companies use it anyway? What kind of audits do you do? What is that context? Can you give your insights in that one?
Yeah, of course. That's the reason why I'm here. Thanks, Otto. Of course, TAPA, it is not the nice small appetizers in Spain. It is, or stands for Transport Asset Protection Association. And of course, we are setting the standards for the supply chain. At least we are taking care about industry standards for facility, for transport, for parking, and for cybersecurity. So this is at least our role, our goal, our backbones. We have roughly 960 member companies. Of course, we started 2004 already with a small group of mobile phone distributors and production plants like Motorola, Nokia, and in these days the name was Technology. And then we moved fast to transported asset as, of course, more companies joined us. And in the meantime, it's not only these SAFT critical cargo, it's also productions of food, it is pharmaceuticals, the top brands of pharmaceuticals we have, of course, in our membership. And of course, they are using these standards. And the standards are talking about facility security requirements, trucking security requirements, parking security requirements, and the cyber security standard. And the complete supply chain can use that standard. And it's not only needed that you go for the certification. Download the standard, using the standards, integrating that into your contract. It supports, it supports your day job, and it explains also what your vendors, what your suppliers, what your logistics service providers can do or have to do at a later stage.
So at the end of the day, if I'm looking for a third-party logistics provider, as a company, you check whether your third-party logistics provider has a TAPA certificate. Is that the way to do it, or also a company?
At least that's what the industry is asking for in the meantime. If you are one of these production plants and you want to keep your supply chain in a secure way, so that means that you have security-related measures and risk analysis tools in your warehouse. If you're also going on the transport, that you're using the right equipment, that you're using hard-sided vehicles, locked vehicles, alarm-connected vehicles, and that's setting the standard. At least also background checks on the drivers, background checks on the warehouse staff. So some rules for warehousing and transporting, and of course on different levels. That doesn't mean that we only can transport the wheels or the money. It starts also with raw materials for the tobacco industry, and it can go on a level, on a basic level 3, for example. And we have 3 different levels of each of these standards. So from basic, from entrance and start to the high level security.
Okay, thank you. Francisco, now if you're talking about social management, we are coming closer to ESG. How does this work with your certification?
Right, so the way that works is pretty, it's nothing new. What we're talking is something that is already very much spread and everybody uses, that is ISO standard. The difference between just an assessment or a verification and an ISO standard is that the ISO standard imposes the development and the deployment of a management system into your organization. That means that you will change your governance, you will put new responsibilities, you will put resources, and you will put a process behind achieving something, whatever that is. All ISO standards do that exactly the same thing on a different topic. So Foundation FSSC started for the reasons they were working on food safety. And what they did was make a scheme that deployed ISO 22000, that is food safety. And today, in 15 years, they have more than 37,000 food companies worldwide that are using that. So as a foundation, what they want is to make an impact, and they have made an impact with the number of people that there is in this planet. that there is no more people dying by food intoxication is in part thanks to FSSC, I think, and ISO 22000, because food safety in virtually every food company. So now they want to do the same on the social side. So it's putting in place a management system that means ensuring that in your company you have the governance, the responsibilities declared, the people trained, the resources necessary, and the process to day in, day out do due diligence on a topic that is social, on the same way that they did on food safety, or on the same way that ISO 27001 do on information security, or 9001 do on quality. ISO 9001 on quality works, and there is hundreds of thousands of certifications because it forces you to every day do it, to do it every single day, okay? And it's not by coincidence that the legislators are asking for that. All the new laws on the social side, CSDD, the Canadian law on work, forced labor and child labor, the English New Slavery Act, all these new laws in the United States, in California, in Australia. So I was mentioning that even I found in Namibia that there is also a law like that. Why? Because there is another in South Africa. Why? Because there is another in England. So that makes a snowball effect. Okay. So all those laws ask exactly for the same thing. That is, demonstrate and document that you are doing due diligence by analyzing the risk on the area that we are talking about, in this case, on the social area. When you analyze the risk, do all the necessary to mitigate those risks, and if the risk realized, solve the impact of the risk, and then do a plan, do, check, act cycle. So verify what you are doing, put the measures, verify those, and improve your cycle. This is what all this law is asking. If you look at the heart of CS3D, this is what they're asking. And it's not a coincidence. Legislators, they are not particularly imaginative people. They look outside and they say, oh, what works out there? This thing works, let's ask for this. And this is where we think there is the issue and there is the solution, is on ensuring that we are seriously managing those social issues, day in, day out. If you do a verification, you make a snapshot, okay, God knows what happened the next day. If you have people that they are every single day looking for this, you know that your chances that that works are way higher.
Thank you, Francisco. So we had today the speech of Anselm, who has said this CS3CCD, or how it's called, sorry for that, that this is a good law, but how to manage if something happens. So EU has set up a good law, but has not thought, probably not thought really through how to make it manageable. And then I have prepared this panel. I knew that these are distinguished people. They typically represent an association which is from the industry for the industry. I thought, hey, isn't this the right people to tackle such a problem? How to manage this corporate social the due diligence directive in a way to make this happen, whether this is a one database or whatever the solution that would be, I don't know, but I would say I could imagine that people like this should be called up to do something like that. But before we jump into this kind of interaction with you guys, I would like to have Mickaël bring in his view. Why is the International Tin Association still required if we are having certifications like this? Well, what is your input into that one?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start by saying that when I see people here today and the companies here today, very likely most of them will have some minerals in either the product that they manufacture or that they use. I'll assume everyone has a phone, and in that phone you will have certain minerals that come from conflict-affected and high-risk areas. In fact, one in more than 70%, more or less, of certain minerals called tantalum comes from Central Africa, in the DRC, Rwanda, Burundi. So everyone in the room today, or 70% of the people in the room today, will have certain minerals that come from that region. And the first question is, well, what's happening down there? How do we manage the risk down there? And it's exactly what we do with the International Tin Supply Chain Initiative to respond to those risks. So we are establishing traceability because the first thing you need to know is, where do the minerals come from? What are the mines? Where are they located? What are the conditions at those mines? And we cover today around 3,000 mine sites in the region, establishing traceability with government. That's the first step to understand the risks. Second thing, we work in a very volatile environment. Now, if you as a company want to act diligently, you will want to know, well, what are the risks and how do I manage them? Now, the problem is, obviously, each single company will have a very hard time to manage that on their own. As I said, 3,000 mine sites located in very remote area. For those of you who are familiar with the DRC, huge country of the size of Europe, with thousands of kilometers, very poor infrastructure. So every single company has a very hard time to do that. You could do it, but it would cost you a lot of money, highly inefficient, and very likely you would not see anything valuable, because I can assure you, everyone would know months in advance before you arrive on the ground. So that's where we feel the gap. As an industry association, we are providing an initiative that is a joint industry initiative because it's the most efficient thing to do. And it resonates a lot with what I hear today when I hear the challenges of every single company to assess the risks. Well, actually, this is a much more efficient way to do that. Companies participating in a program where we are on the ground with local teams, monitoring all the risks and supporting their mitigation, sharing that information with all the members companies located in the upstream supply chain, so from mine to smelters, to then enable them to assess properly the risks, to have informed decision. But we are there to fill that gap, helping them to address those risks. Human rights risks, risks related to armed groups, which is a very current topic at the moment, that no company can do alone. So that's really a collaborative approach to really show that you can actually achieve risks resolution. And I would say always the message I give, because we hear a lot today in the presentation, well, you need to run away from risks, right? We need to avoid those risks. And I would say, well, you need to embrace those risks, because actually you can decide to look away. That won't resolve the risks. And I know that a lot of companies will try to minimize as much as possible the risks by finding alternative solutions. If we come back to the point of tantalum that I mentioned at the beginning, well, you cannot avoid actually sourcing tantalum from Central Africa. So the only solution is to engage, to embrace those risks, to show that you are actually aware of them, and to support work to enable their mitigation on the ground. And that's what the International Tin Supply Chain Initiative comes in and provides support.
Yes, please.
Just to add on top of that, this new law CS3D explicitly is asking that you don't cut your ties with your provider. Your provider has a problem. You need to work with them and try to help them solve the problems. Because otherwise, okay, so I stop working with Africa, I stop working with Latin America, I stop working with China, I work with European companies that they are close and I can find out what I do, and end of the story, I avoid risk. And that is not the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is understanding that the risks, they are not in your company, they are in your supply chain. What is the risk that you have child labor in your company, in Europe, in Germany? Zero. What is the risk that happen in the provider of the provider of the provider that is in Central Africa? Quite high. So that is the spirit of those laws. And that is where we need to work towards, even if it will be tough.
let me ask here the question. So the three minerals you mentioned, it's good to hear that this is taken care of in this way, but we have many more minerals which are sourced in a similar way. Would it be possible to set up similar organizations for those? Is something happening in this way?
Well, from my perspective, I mean, the work that we do it for the 3T, so-called conflict minerals, even though we don't like to call them that anymore because it has a negative connotation. The first point is, well, what are the standards you're using? The standards we use are based on the OECD due diligence guidance. They apply to any mineral. So you can do and replicate that solution for any mineral. The work that we do in the Great Lakes region could be replicated in any geographies. And we work with mostly artisanal and small scale, a few semi-industrial mining companies. But in fact, you could do exactly the same with any type of companies. So your question is, well, yes, you could do that everywhere. And yet that's a very important point you're making. It's not happening, right? And it's not happening for many reasons, in my opinion. Well, the first question is, who is paying for it? So at the moment, what we do, covering upstream supply chain, 99.9% of the costs are borne by the upstream industry, companies between mine and smelter. Now, the one benefiting from it at the end of the day are downstream companies who will be able to buy minerals that have been responsibly sourced. So this is the first imbalance that we see. Who is paying for what at the moment? As a matter of fact, if we look at the EU regulation, not the CSDDD, there is already one on 3TG from 2017, which has a global scope, which means that every company, and there are certain thresholds, but companies in Europe importing minerals, 3TG, should perform some sort of due diligence when it comes from conflict-affected and high-risk areas. And those areas are not limited to Central Africa. You have others in Western Africa, in South America, in Asia. What is happening today? Nothing, right? We are, as far as I know, the only large-scale due diligence program for 3T. So what's lacking is incentives and funding. Real funding and incentives from the industry, because it has to come from the industry, to be ready to engage in other areas and set up such system. It's possible. It requires the willingness to do so.
Good. If we talk about funding, I'm not sure whether these are multi-million numbers. Okay. I would like to open up to the audience so that you also can ask questions. Ben, please.
embrace these like different rules in different countries, different areas, and being in conflict with their own, let's say, in comparison, high compliance standards, and not at the end seeing their business at risk if they would not comply to the rules of, for instance, China or other companies who obviously have other standards than in Western companies.
Can I answer to that? Because I worked on a big multinational. So, in fact, it's very simple. You have good big multinationals and bad good multinationals. Bad good multinationals, they will go and say hypocritically, oh, we apply the law on all the countries that we work on. So if you're working on a country that the corruption on the level of the law is like this, and for example, you can officially die of starvation with the minimum salary, they are complying with the law. That's what they said. Then you have good multinationals. What they said is, we have our own standards, and we apply them wherever we operate. And wherever we operate, if the local standard is higher than ours, is the local standard that applies. If our standard is higher than ours, than the law, then is ours that applies. And that is why on some countries, some multinationals, they have an extremely good reputation. They pay for locals is very good salaries. They have good working conditions, because I can tell you, at least where I worked, the conditions of work in Denmark were the same than in Namibia, or in South Africa, or in Zimbabwe. Exactly the same. And I know that because I've been visiting those countries, and I've been working a few years in other countries. So it's exactly the same. And that is the approach. In fact, it's very simple. If the local law is better than your internal standard, it's the local law. If not, it's your standard. And normally that is the case. I would say okay, it's not being racist, but normally Europe works in one way and the Americans work in another way.
If I can just react to that, I mean, one key point is, if your standards are too high, then you'll never start. So, if you apply Western standards in sourcing from Central Africa, where we work, then the work that we've been doing for 15 years would have never, ever started. So I think that's the first discussion that any company should have internally. Well, what level of risk are you ready to embrace? But actually, as we heard from the presentation on IT, the risk is already there, actually. It's already in your supply chain. You just don't know it. So you have conflict minerals in your supply chain, I can guarantee you. You just don't know it. Yeah, exactly. Or you don't want to know about it. So it's actually already there. So the question I would ask you is, well, are you ready to show that you are at the forefront in your business among your peers to say, well, I choose to engage? You'll certainly have to talk to your legal department, because they may be risky. They may be afraid of repercussions. But I would always say it's rather better to show that you are engaging rather than running away, because again, it's the only thing you cannot know or predict and you have no control of is anyone doing a campaign on your company, bringing you in the news, and you don't want that. You want to be at the forefront of that.
Okay, we're coming to an end. If I try to close this conversation, on the one hand, we see a law which was set up, but it was not thought through in a way how to manage the law if there is non-compliance. What is the database, how to manage these kind of things. On the other side, we see, I would say, many approaches where I would say this is meaningful. If you put this together, I would say it covers almost or many parts of the supply chain. We see today that there are some minerals which are not covered. Was that probably in the part of the idea when the laws were set up, that we have supply chains up to the mines that they are ESG compatible? So based on that, I would almost like say there are two things which I would take home from this conversation with you guys as experts. That one, the law is not thought through if there is a non-compliance, how to manage that one. And the second one is, can we extend the scope, for instance, point of view of the critical minerals? I would say this is not a financial question. I assume the costs of your organization, they are evaporated in the snip of a finger. If we look at the value we create with those minerals on a social scale. So I would say these are my conclusions. I have to close here. Thank you so much for the conversation, for your inputs into this one. So thank you for that.